Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. We have always this confusion that sometimes we are Paraguay and Uruguay, and there's a book here which says that we have to have that distinction, but both countries come from the same name in Guarani. That means it's one of the languages from the region, and we take that name from that. Well, the idea is that I give you a small picture over how Uruguay really is dealing with the partnership with the Arab world. I understand that most of the symposium in where you have been has been addressing that the Arab world can be considered to be currently in a phase of a major transition, where not only has the Arab world a rich diversity of ethnic and religious communities in a population of over 400 million, the Arab world is an ancient civilization, and I will talk to you about some of the aspects of how we see it. But we understand that there is no doubt that the Arab world offers opportunities for cultural diplomacy in the framework of a current transition and challenges, and of course we are willing and able to be part of the solution in a community where we think we have a lot to deliver. I will start by telling you a little bit how my country, Uruguay, established itself in the problems of the Middle East. And as you all know, Uruguay has backed in 1924, and even before that, in November 2nd, 1917, the Balfour Declaration that inspired the 1948 international support to create the State of Israel. Nevertheless, by resolution 181 of the General Assembly of 29th of November 1949, that is still pending, this resolution recognized the rights of the creation of an Arab state that will finally bring durable peace among Palestinians and Israelis. In March 29, 2011, Uruguay established formal relations with Palestine Authority. And in January this year, during an intervention of the Foreign Affairs Minister of my country, Mr. Rodolfo Noboa, in the Security Council, where we are, as you know, non-permanent members for this year and next year, he stood for the respect of international humanitarian law in its main purpose to protect civilians, and called for the immediate termination of violence in the illegal settlements, which he stated in the main obstacle for peace. The Middle East faces complex challenges originated by serious conflicts, new risks, and a suffering of thousands of innocent victims. That's what he said in that opportunity. And in this regard, Uruguay has a strong commitment and seriously worries that the freeze of the negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian authorities, the ongoing situation in Syria, still engaged in a civil war, and also for the expansion of problems of terrorism in the region. We surely need to address how cultural diplomacy can be an invaluable instrument to make the existence of our friends in the Arab world and how they can improve their daily life. In this sense, South America is called to step in as a positive broker. We already have a compromise from UNASUR. You know, UNASUR is the Union of South American States, which Uruguay, my country, presided until last month. And there we already have a mechanism where we work together that it's called the Summit of South America and Arab Countries, ASPA in Spanish. That is the existing dialogue that we have among UNASUR and the Arab League, and it is a mechanism of South-South cooperation. There have been already meetings that they are held every 3 years. The first one was in Brasilia in 2005. The second one was in Doha in 2009. The third was in Lima in 2012. The most recent one was in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia in 2015. And the next one will be in Caracas in 2018. During the summit in Riyadh, the 22 countries of the Arab League and the 12 of UNASUR agreed to strengthen cooperation in political, economic, commercial technologies, and in environmental issues. They also ratified their commitment to the post-2015 UN Declaration on Sustainable Development. But as you know, the slowdown of the Chinese economy, the financial and refugee crisis in Europa, and the difficulties in the Latin American region were also one of the parts in discussions. It was more than that stated that the task is to set 2030 as the goal to adjust in sustainable development. The Secretary General, as you know, of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, has praised both regions, the Latin American and the Arabs and Latin Americas, for the cooperation that we have initiated a decade ago. In a moment when many economic crises are undergoing, there are many challenges to even fight against corruption, and that is where the government of my country, presided by Dr. Tabaré Vázquez, has committed itself to an open market economy that has the great challenge to seek for new opportunities in countries that demand best quality food products. That is why the Arab countries are seen by our private sector as a promising and demanding new challenge where we can do profitable business, and there is already a vision that we can upgrade our relationship. And precisely to address the potential of Arab countries has also been taken into account by my country in open more embassies in the region. And this is how we recognize this. We are standing in one of the most important markets for quality foods, interests that have been on the rise concerning the Arab countries, and especially because they are big consumers of milk, dairy products, meat, sugar, and olive oil. – Uruguay has also been assisting to the Gulf Food Fair in Dubai, and in the past days we have been participating in the International Trade Fair of Luanda to also address more consistently the African continent. This shift towards emerging markets has stressed the need to focus on Arab countries as a way of understanding and building awareness for the demand of responsible, innovative, and care for natural foods that Uruguay produces with the highest standards of quality. I will refer to you a very interesting approach that I was given by a friend of mine that she's the head of the Department of Political Science and coordinator of the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies of Africa, Asia, South-South relations of the city that will hold the Olympics in a few days, Rio de Janeiro. And this was in the Rhodes Forum of Scientific Marathon. Her name is Professor Beatriz Vicio. And she has, I'm not going to read to you all, but I'm going to just give you some fragments of her investigation where she says, Islam and the West, another form from coexistence is possible. History allows to understand why. And I will read you one part of it that I think is crucial in this link that we look forward to in both regions. She says, understanding a particular culture is diving into its values, deciphering its code, studying its symbols, and submerging in its history. In a time when certain groups representing specific interests of the West chose Islam, and particularly Arab Muslims, as an enemy to be fought, it is important to rescue some aspects of the history of Arab and Islamic civilization, to understand how this view is misguided and biased. The study of the history of Islam leads us to understand that the Muslim world is not that other with which the Western world can only come into confrontation. Rather, it enables us to understand how this civilization has contributed to the cultural development of humanity and, of course, of the West. And after more of her conclusions, she ends up saying that it should be remembered that it was largely thanks to the Arab manuscripts translated into Latin and the vernacular languages that Europe laid the foundations for what would be known in history as the Renaissance. These unique characteristics of Islamic civilizations allow us to affirm that feeling chosen by God and with a mission to play, Muhammad and his followers spread the seeds of a transformation process that gave rise to a classic civilization. And with this, its initial scene set in Mecca and Medina, two urban centers of a barren desert framed by the Arabian Peninsula, the Islamic civilization would be marked for centuries by such origins on the one hand. Arab Muslims would choose the city as a special area of religious, political, cultural, scientific, and social development. On the other, they would preserve Bedouin values, loyalty, temperance, group cohesion, asabiya value as an ethical reference and compass for social behavior. Language and religion, coupled with the legacy of classical antiquity and the contributions of other cultures with which the Arabs began to establish fluid contact, were the foundations that enabled the building of a civilization and a lasting empire which allowed for centuries a fairly harmonious coexistence between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And I find that is the main clue into what we say, and I go over the fact of what I was telling you at the beginning. We find that we need to particularly envisage a new way of making of this dialogue among cultures a basic, a sincere way of avoiding conflicts. So my real short presentation was in the side of going to address how South America, how my country, Uruguay, in the context of a region, is also willing to be part of the solution to all the problems that we have in the region, and how we are trying to handle a situation that we know, even in the United Nations, has long been not resolved, how we can contribute with what they're doing in other regions too. So basically, I promise to be short. I promise to not go very furthermore in issues, but if you are willing to, or if you have questions, I'm ready to answer them. So.
Thank you, Ambassador Amarilla. Something that I should have done at the beginning, I will do it now to introduce you with two more sentences. Ambassador Alberto Guani Amarilla studied international relations in Uruguay and graduated in 1987. And from March '89, he took in East Berlin his first job outside Uruguay. Later, he has become the chief of protocol in the Uruguayan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then he had the function of Consul General in Rio de Janeiro. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, since 2012, he is ambassador of Uruguay in the Federal Republic of Germany. Thank you very much for your brilliant presentation. Now we are going to ask the audience whether they have any questions. I'm sure that there will be many. Who would like to make comments or ask questions? You are offering each other. Okay. Any questions? Yes, please.
So thank you, Ambassador Guani Amarilla, for your interesting presentation on this topic. And my name is Daniel Hurt, intern here. And I would like to know, Uruguay is a relatively small but key player in its geopolitical environment. With which of the country of the Arab world do you think would have most links in common? Thank you.
Well, it has a lot to do with history, and it has a lot to do with how we have, in a certain way, made the approaches. I was saying that Uruguay, for example, has developed very close ties with Egypt. We also have developed very close ties with Lebanon, and we find there excellent brokers in which we can put together most of our let's say, views. But I would tell you that that has to do also with a small immigration process, which in Uruguay not really was so intense, because we have received people, yes, from origin Syrian Lebanese. We have received not many others from other Arab countries, but we find that this link is like the basic part in which we are trying to even open ourselves more in countries which, in a certain way, we have some interest, but we don't have too much, let's say, cultural approach. And I'm talking about Saudi Arabia even, and other important players in the region that it's not that we are newcomers, but we are trying to establish our ways of having closer ties. But it's a process that I think we have assumed, as I was saying, that through the UNASUR we want to do it as a regional approach. It's something similar with what we are doing with the European Union in the Mercosur side, but we consider that sometimes addressing all this has to do, for example, with the Arab League, which is a very important source of understanding where the problems are and how to deal with them. And so it's more a collective let's say, effort than it is a binational, which we are, of course, trying to address it. So I would say that that's the answer to your question.
Who emigrated to Uruguay in the year 1905, 1906, at that time, because there was a big wave of the Ottoman citizens who emigrated to Latin American countries and who formed a very strong community there, and they are referred to as Turcos. And if you have such a community, of course, your relations with the now Now it works. Your relations with the Arab countries will be easier. They may constitute a bridge. Do you have such a community?
It's not that strong, but maybe because there has been, let's say, a more intense form of immigrations of Armenians to Uruguay, maybe than Turks. So we were the first country in the world to recognize the genocide in Armenia. So maybe that created a sort of situation in which they were a minority. But we still have a strong majority of Armenians in Uruguay, which have also stood by since long time from that. But at the same time, of course, what we were talking, we are looking at from the other side, and we are also evaluating that Turkey is a very important player in which we need to establish bridges to make more approach, let's say, from one and the other, in spite of maybe those aspects also that have to do with history. But I would tell you that the Turkish immigration in Uruguay is not as strong as the Armenian, and I find it is not comparable to the rest of Latin America.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
Thank you for the presentation. I have a very short but practical question. What exact tools of cultural diplomacy do you use, and with which countries?
Well,
thank you.
There was a famous project in which we tried to make together to, for example, make Uruguayan authors in literature be more known in the region. Like, for example, Benedetti is one of them that it's been translated into the Arab language. We have established a way of also our biggest literature values to be given and spreaded, because that's where we have to start to understand each other and how we think and what we... I always say that Uruguay, in spite of its small dimension, it is a cultural superpower, because we have had many important citizens that have been long-standing and important in many fields, like, for example, in arts, and Torres Garcia, that was one of the painters that started with constructivism. We have had many important people from the literary. José Enrique Rodó was another one. We have had numerous expressions in which they are not very well known, maybe. That's why we try to bridge this lack of understanding or knowing each other through spreading more of what are highlights in culture, in certain ways, in how we have approached even, as you know, well, President Gauck from Germany was in Uruguay a couple of days ago, and he was saying, well, we are very amazed how this small country has done so much, like having been the place where it was the first country to recognize the divorce for the only will of women, for example, the first country to eliminate the death penalty, a couple of issues that have taken us as a very progressive land, and where we have even now our present president is the one who installed a couple of important values that he has been very famous in the press recently because of this trial that we had against one of the tobacco companies because it has been going in positively, and that has put us that a president is looking more for not for the interest of the corporations, but of the health of people. So, I mean, that gives you a special tone from a country that it's small, yes, but that looks upon certain values that are very important for humanity and sometimes that are not very much known because the press generally does not address on each of these issues. And sometimes saying what President Gauck was assuming there, how come all what has been your achievements are not very well known, even in the region? And we say that sometimes we are too much humble of talking about these things, and we need to overcome more of that by expressing exactly where we stood, where we stand, and where we want to go. I always say that in my country, human rights is the center of all policies, and I always go on in the same direction because I think the time you put the human being in the center of everything, well, you have a conduct besides that. And that's how it has been seen by a country that does that precisely. And that goes back to your question, but I mean in the sense that how we have managed to produce a space where liberty, the difference of opinion, and democracy has been the basic standard in which we all agree. It's even a country where a former, how you say, terrorist or subversive person like Mujica has been going into the government, and then you say that cannot happen. But it's also a country that has started a process of revisiting many of its values since 2005, in which we have a government that comes from the left, yes, but it's not only trying to ideologize the way of handling business. And that's something that we very much see. I mean, it is a distinctive feature, and it's something that it's part of a structure that they tell us sometimes, how do you do it? And we say, well, it's not that we are unique, but we have a sensation in which all those issues like, I always say that we have managed to separate religion from the state. We have always, since the beginning of last century, avoided the religious conflict, not by saying I don't like this religion, just by saying we can tolerate all. But that's one of the ways that in the time you have the preponderance of one to the other, you start having conflicts. And we find that that's the way we need to keep things. Maybe, not everybody thinks the same way, but we respect the other ones that don't think the same, but we do not try to convince them by force. And that is a very laudable attitude, I think.
Thank you very much.